With Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding taking place in May of 2018, there was a ton of speculation about just what kind of wedding dress the soon-to-be royal would choose. The video game industry would be a very different place without Nintendo. Would she opt for an Alexander McQueen as did Kate Middleton? Or would she wear a gown that paid homage to Harry's late mother, Princess Diana? Others wondered if she'd go a completely different route and choose something totally untraditional. It wouldn't be her first time breaking the royal rules, after all. But Markle's wedding gown wasn't the first to spark public intrigue. After all, since the late Queen Mother, dresses of the royal brides have been a hot topic of discussion. Even when the company wasn't pioneering and developing video game genres and mechanics, it usually hosted huge titles on its various consoles. Some royals have cemented their role in history with beautiful gowns and others, well, some not so beautiful gowns. Here are the very worst to the very best royal wedding dresses. The dress of epic proportions. Princess Diana, often still referred to as the People's Princess, was a fashion icon in so many ways. While most of these video game memories are immortal thanks to legions of dedicated game archivists, many of the people who created the games have passed on. Nintendo has been around since the late 80s, the late 1880s, that is, via Business Insider, so it should come as no surprise that many Nintendo employees have passed away. But that applies to the Nintendo employees who were with the company back when it just made playing cards. Larry Lynn, the curator of Kensington Palace exhibition, Diana, her fashion story, told Vanity Fair, Diana is stepping into that same sort of space as an Audrey Hepburn or Jackie Kennedy. The late princess often used her fashion to send a message. According to Lynn, she wanted people to know she was approachable, so she chose colorful clothing. She would also forego gloves so she could hold people's hands in hers. Diana was truly one of a kind. Of course, her wedding dress had to be one of a kind as well. What about Nintendo game developers? Well, as detailed by the BBC, Nintendo swapped cards for cartridges in 1975, and many people have passed on in those 46 years. A number of Nintendo's first developers weren't young to begin with, and tragedy can strike at any time. While quite a few first and third-party Nintendo game designers are still around, quite a few have passed away. David Emanuel, designer of the famous dress, told Entertainment Tonight, "This dress had to be young and sweet, but it also had to be glam because she was going to be a royal princess." And glam it was. Even if you don't recognize their names, their accomplishments, and occasional flops, should be all too familiar to most audiences. Satoru Iwata is a legend who needs no introduction to most gaming audiences. It featured a royal record-breaking 25-foot-long train, which was embroidered by hand with pearls and sequins. From 2002 to 2015, he served as Nintendo's president and CEO and led the company into a golden age. Under Iwata's leadership, Nintendo realized that gaming software trumped hardware, which resulted in blockbuster consoles such as the DS and Wii that sold on the quality of their games, not their graphics cards. The dress definitely made a statement and was emulated for decades, but it's certainly not a dress you'd want to wear today. A new meaning to royal blue. If you're a fan of the Netflix series The Crown, you likely know a thing or two about King Edward VIII and his wife, Wallis Simpson. Their love story was practically made for television. Of course, Iwata didn't get where he was because Nintendo drew his name out of a hat. According to the former king's biography, the couple met while Simpson was married and Edward was a prince. No, he earned his position. When Iwata started his video game career, he began at HAL Laboratory and quickly migrated to Nintendo. The two entered into a relationship shortly before Edward became king. Being king meant he wouldn't be able to marry Simpson, the American socialite who, at this time, was now a divorcee. Less than a year after taking the throne, Edward abdicated in order to marry her. He programmed iconic titles such as Balloon Fight and Earthbound, before later serving as producer for franchises like Kirby and Super Smash Bros. Iwata had his finger wedged in so many game development pies that he was credited for titles long after his death. Although this didn't exactly sit well with the royal family, Edward was given a new title, Duke of Windsor, and spent the rest of his life with the woman he loved, after marrying her in a private ceremony in France in 1937. Pictures of the time, being in black and white, make Simpson's dress appear white or perhaps cream. The last game to feature Iwata as a posthumous executive producer was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, released nearly 2 years after his death. According to a report from Rolling Stone, Iwata's death was the result of a prolonged battle with a bile duct tumor. However, her dress was actually blue. According to The Telegraph, it was a simple silk mainboucher gown in a custom color, pale blue, rightfully called Wallace blue. Interesting choice, for sure. Shoulder pads for days. Although Sarah Ferguson became synonymous with scandal back in the late 2000s, her royal wedding to Prince Andrew in 1986 was a blissful affair. At the time, Ferguson was a great fit to become a royal, according to Vanity Fair. On their big day, Ferguson wore a wedding dress somewhat typical of the late 80s. In 2014, he was forced to miss an in-person appearance at E3 after physicians found the growth. He felt much better after surgery and even showed up in puppet form for Nintendo's 2015 E3 digital event. Iwata died several weeks later in July of 2015 at the age of 55. Hiroshi Yamauchi. Before Satoru Iwata led Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi was in charge. Not unlike other royal wedding gowns, her dress was copied by commoners in the following years. Linka Kirik, an African-born British fashion designer, created the dress made of ivory satin with large, very large, shoulder pads and incorporated a ton of beading work. Ferguson's dress was also basically a scrapbook. There were hearts, to symbolize love, along with anchors and waves, which represented Andrew's naval career. Yamauchi had some big shoes to fill, since he was the great-grandson of the company's founder, Fusajiro Yamauchi, and also because Hiroshi inherited the position after his grandfather, Sakurio Kaneda, suffered a stroke. Under Hiroshi, Nintendo metamorphosed from a playing card manufacturer to the video game company audiences know today. That sounds like a lot already, but there were also beaded bumblebees and thistles to represent Ferguson's family crest, and the train, the 17-foot-long train, featured the couple's initials. He had to carefully guide Nintendo's first releases to ensure the transition didn't blow up in its face. During his tenure as president of Nintendo, and owner of the Seattle Mariners, according to Forbes, Hiroshi Yamauchi served as executive producer across 4 console generations. He is credited in titles such as The Legend of Zelda, F-Zero, Donkey Kong, and Mario Party. Yamauchi is also credited in later games like Star Fox Adventures, and the international version of Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. Although Yamauchi stepped down as president of Nintendo in 2002, he stayed on the company's board of directors until 2005, when he retired. Surprisingly, he declined Nintendo's generous retirement pension, estimated in the ballpark of $9–14 million, electing to siphon it back to the company, as he believed Nintendo could put it to better use. On September 19, 2013, Yamauchi died of pneumonia. Eek. Part wedding gown, part turtleneck? The 1970s was a fascinating and bold time for fashion. He was 85 years old. Gunpei Yokoi. If you're a longtime Nintendo fan, odds are good that you owe your childhood gaming memories to Gunpei Yokoi. In fact, gamers who never touched a Nintendo console are also indebted to Yokoi, since he invented the D-pad. Princess Anne, Queen Elizabeth's only daughter, could chalk up her wedding dress choice to the time period, considering she married Captain Mark Phillips back in 1973. The decade may be, at least, partially to blame. However, Yokoi is best known for the Game & Watch handheld, the insanely successful and portable Game Boy, and its antithesis in terms of lovability, the Virtual Boy. Yokoi was also more than just a hardware virtuoso. Yokoi served as producer on a variety of titles, including Metroid, Kid Icarus, Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, and Super Metroid. While these games are key parts of his legacy, Yokoi has another claim to fame: introducing the world to Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto. Nonetheless, Anne's gown was still pretty peculiar, especially in retrospect. According to Express, the princess chose a design by Maureen Baker, who, at the time, was the head designer for the brand Susan Small. Yes, when Miyamoto was just a bright-eyed recruit, Yokoi showed him the ropes and supervised him. Together, they produced the seminal arcade classic, Donkey Kong. Yokoi resigned from Nintendo in 1996 and died 1 year later in a tragic car accident. The Tudor-style gown featured piping on the bodice, which is a bit reminiscent of a ribbed knit sweater, don't you think? The gown's high neck, essentially a turtleneck, didn't exactly help to make the frock look less like a sweater. He was driving with an associate down the Hokuriku Expressway when he rear-ended the vehicle in front of him.
Lastly, the ballooned medieval sleeves tapered at the wrists were another interesting choice. All things considered, the dress managed to be quite flattering and the princess still looked stunning on her wedding day. Flight attendant chic Princess Anne's first marriage to Captain Mark Phillips started to dissolve in 1989 and the two were divorced by 1992, People reported. Yokoi and his passenger were unharmed and exited the vehicle to assess the damage, but tragedy struck twice when a random car side-swiped them. Later that same year, the princess married Commander Timothy Lawrence. While Yokoi's friend only suffered a broken rib, Yokoi was declared dead 2 hours later. Although Anne's wedding dress this time was much simpler than the medieval Maureen Baker creation, it was still a turtleneck, seriously. Anne wore the very modest suit, which stopped at the knee, with a matching white jacket and black shoes. The dress isn't offensive, not in any way, shape or form. He was 56 years old. Hiro Isono. In the war between art style and graphical fidelity, art is often declared the victor. As it was the princess's second wedding and she was obviously older in 1992 than she was in the early 70s, the dress makes a lot of sense. Since it's not always a good idea to rely on programmers alone to develop the look of a game, external artists are in high demand. It's not uncommon for studios to ask painters untrained in the art of video game design to help nail the look they're seeking. That's exactly how Squaresoft developed the signature aesthetic of its Mana franchise. While producing the first true Mana game, Secret of Mana, Squaresoft tapped semi-surrealist painter Hiro Isono. Still, you can't help but wish Anne had chosen something less in the realm of a flight attendant's uniform and something just a tad more glamorous. This decision was a no-brainer for the company. Isono's wheelhouse was drawing trees and forests, and the game's plot revolves around the Mana tree, which serves as both the narrative's MacGuffin and the protagonist's mother, don't ask. Not only did Isono nail the look of the game and serve as its main visual artist, he also returned to fill other illustrator roles in subsequent Mana games, including Trials of Mana and the ill-fated Children of Mana. Moreover, according to Anime News Network, Isono also drew illustrations for numerous novels and served as the primary illustrator for Final Fantasy Adventure. In May 2013, Isono passed away at the age of 68 due to heart failure. Manabu Daishima mapmakers are arguably the unsung heroes of video game development. All in all, it just doesn't have the same wow factor that many other royal dresses are known for. A feather in her cap when Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles, finally, wed in 2005, Bowles picked a perfectly appropriate outfit. A white chiffon gown paired with a light blue and gold damask dress coat. The coat, made by Robinson Valentine, featured a tasteful amount of gold embroidery throughout. Blink and you'd miss it, but the collar was especially beautiful. Inspired by a particular piece of jewelry belonging to her late mother, Bowles' dress was embroidered around the collar in a similar pattern. Creating in-game locales doesn't seem like the most glorious of positions, but there is an art to making digital typographies that entice gamers. What a meaningful, and wonderfully subtle, touch. Bowles paired her outfit with a gold feather headdress. While Bowles undoubtedly looked stunning and so very happy to be marrying the love of her life, the dramatic headdress was arguably a little on the distracting side. The world could use more video game mapmakers, and a few years ago, gamers lost one of the most talented creators in the biz. You've probably never heard of Manabu Daishima, but you've more than likely seen his work. A veil would not have made sense with her ensemble, but perhaps a smaller headpiece would have been a more fitting accompaniment to her big day look. Simply 90s Prince Edward, the Queen's youngest son who looks shockingly like Prince William, wed Sophie Rhys-Jones in 1999. Daishima was a longtime employee at Square Enix, having started working at the company back when it was known as Squaresoft. The couple said their vows before 200 million TV viewers, according to Hello magazine. For an event like that, you've got to look stunning. And that's exactly what Rhys-Jones did. Although her dress was very indicative of the 90s style, a hem, shoulder pads, her V-neck gown could easily be refashioned for today. From far away, Rhys-Jones' gown seems pretty minimalist, other than the long veil, but there is a lot more to this ensemble than meets the eye. Part of the gown was made of hand-dyed silk organza, making the dress much more complicated than it would appear. One of his first jobs was designing monsters in Romancing Saga, but he quickly found his home in the digital map-making profession.
Daishima created the map graphics for Secret of Mana, and the field graphics for Chrono Trigger, and he stuck with Square when it transferred from Nintendo to Sony hardware. Daishima was also responsible for the field maps in Final Fantasy IX, and Final Fantasy XII. Due to his contributions to the series, he was credited in Final Fantasy XII: The Zodiac Age, even though the game was released after his death. According to Kotaku, which translated the original article from Mainichi Shimbun, Daishima was involved in a fatal diving accident off the coast of Japan in July 2016. It was also embellished with a combination of pearls and crystal beads, a whopping 325,000 of them. The coordinating veil also featured crystals, of course. This wedding gown was definitely fit for Rhys Jones' new title, Countess of Wessex. All about that lace these days. Queen Elizabeth is known for her brightly colored outfits. Whether she's donning a hot pink or lime green suit, she certainly doesn't shy away from making bold fashion statements. He was 45 years old at the time of his death. Dale de Chiron. While not every Legend of Zelda is created equal, you'd be hard-pressed to find an entirely hated entry. Even the infamous CDI games have their fans, who appreciate them for their meme ability. Although her use of color has evolved over time, the Queen seems to have always had an eye for style. Her wedding dress was no exception. Although it's probably not a dress you'd say yes to today, it's still pretty amazing, especially for having been made in 1947. While some might cheer for their general lack of canonicity, via Nintendo Life, talented developers spent countless hours creating these games. Designed by Norman Hartnell and inspired by the famous Primavera painting of Sandro Botticelli, the then princess's ivory-colored satin dress was embroidered in a floral pattern with silver thread. Even the most capable developers can make a flop. The most infamous, and memeable, of the CDI, Zelda, games are, Link, The Faces of Evil, and, Zelda, The Wand of Gamelon, which were produced and designed by Dale de Chiron. The dress was also embellished with white seed pearls imported from the United States. And you can't chalk up those games' lack of quality to a lack of experience, since de Chiron previously developed several games. The title that put him on the map was a point-and-click adventure called Below the Root. Thankfully, de Chiron's tenure on the CDI, Zelda, games didn't poison his reputation, since he also worked on King's Quest VII, and served as executive producer for Darkened Sky, the world's only 6-hour, teen-oriented commercial for Skittles. The last game on de Chiron's resume was Chris Moneymaker's World Poker Championship, which released in 2005. The Queen's dress also had a long silk tulle train attached at the shoulders. Even her shoes were embellished with little seed pearls to tie the look together. Maybe her look was a bit extra, but hey, she's the epitome of royalty. Keepin' it classy. Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth's sister, married Anthony Armstrong Jones, a fashion photographer, in 1960. He passed away in 2008, per Nintendo Life, following a battle with leukemia. Mark Hay Hutchinson. While most of Nintendo's studios make their home in Japan, several are dotted throughout the rest of the world. Town & Country reported that their big day was actually the first royal wedding ever broadcasted on television, and it pulled in about 300 million viewers. One of these famous Western Nintendo partners is Retro Studios. Nerve-wracking? Much? Regardless, Margaret didn't disappoint. Norman Hartnell, the same designer who created Queen Elizabeth's stunning gown, created Margaret's. As noted by Polygon, Retro was born from the ashes of Iguana Entertainment, the company that broke the Nintendo 64's kid-friendly stigma with Turok, Dinosaur Hunter, and Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, and went on to create some of Nintendo's most memorable titles. Although the princess's dress incorporated silk organza much like the Queen's, it was much simpler overall. A key mind behind the studio died far too young. Metroid Prime is the game that put Retro Studios on the map, partially because it was the company's first official title, and a crucial component to the game's success was Mark Hay Hutchinson. He served as senior engineer on all 3 entries, where he utilized much of his coding know-how. Hay Hutchinson's first stint on a Nintendo license was as a programmer for the hyper-difficult Zombies Ate My Neighbors, after which he worked almost exclusively on sci-fi titles, specifically those that took place in a galaxy far, far away. That's not to say it was boring, not at all. Star Wars, Dark Force, Star Wars, Shadow of the Empire, Star Wars, Rogue Squadron 3D, and Star Wars, Episode 1 Racer, all feature the programming fingerprints of Hay Hutchinson. Unfortunately, Hay Hutchinson passed away long before Retro Studios started working on Metroid Prime 4. In 2008, he died at the age of 43 after fighting valiantly against pancreatic cancer. Kazuhisa Hashimoto. While Demon's Souls reignited the all games should have an easy mode argument, it was far from the spark that started that particular fire. In fact, it looked like the quintessential princess dress. Back in the early days of home video game consoles, developers often thought the only way to make a game last long was to make it difficult. They hadn't fully transitioned from the quarter-guzzling arcade cabinet mindset. It didn't hurt that it literally was a princess gown. The difficulties of some games were cranked so high that even developers offered a helping hand, which is how the Konami code became legendary. Up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, start. That was the sequence of buttons Kazuhisa Hashimoto programmed into games to help ease the difficulty. The full skirt alone required over 30 meters of fabric. While most gamers likely associate the code with Contra, Hashimoto implemented it first into Gradius, which he helped port from an existing arcade cabinet. That means, if you could stand the silk on end, it would measure about as tall as a 9-story building. While that's impressive, even more phenomenal was Margaret's dramatic tiara. Since the game was too hard for Hashimoto, he programmed the cheat into the NES version to help him finish, and while he intended to remove it in the completed version, that never happened. Of course, Hashimoto had more than just Contra and Gradius to his name. He also worked on the arcade versions and NES ports of titles such as Scramble and Super Cobra. Hashimoto was also system advisor for the Hideo Kojima classic, Snatcher. As far as Nintendo legends go, Hashimoto died fairly recently. He passed away in 2020 at the age of 61 due to undisclosed causes. Masato Masuda. Some game developers are genre chameleons. They are just as capable of developing a high-octane beat-em-up as they are of creating a tense survival horror. Designed for Lady Poltimore in the 1870s, it looked more like it was made for her. The Queen Mother was quite the fashionista. If you've ever wondered where Queen Elizabeth gets her fashion sense, it's likely inherited from her mother. Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, as she was known in the early 1920s, married Prince Albert in 1923. You may not be able to picture the royals embracing the edgy flapper trend of the 20s, but, at least as far as the Queen Mother is concerned, it definitely happened. Bowes-Lyon wore a dropped-waist pearl and silver threaded gown along with a flapperesque headpiece to her royal nuptials. The gown, designed by Madame Hanley Seymour, was in the moire style, which meant the silk had to be heated and pressure-rolled after weaving it in order to give it the iconic rippled look of the 20s. While Meghan Markle may be credited with pushing the boundaries when it comes to fashion these days, could the Queen Mother have been the first one to test the royal waters nearly a century ago? So very Prince William and Kate Middleton's wedding may have been pushed to the back burner after Prince Harry and Meghan Markle got engaged, but it's still very much worth remembering. Middleton's Alexander McQueen gown, especially, deserves to stay in the spotlight. Others, such as Masato Masuda, develop a taste for one genre and rarely venture outside its borders. One of the biggest wrestling game franchises, especially in Japan, is Fire Pro Wrestling. The series, designed and programmed by Masuda, has been updated and ported to a variety of consoles, with its latest iteration available on the PlayStation 4. According to Good Housekeeping, the bodice was inspired by Victorian-era corsets, and Middleton even added a little padding below the waist for a more flared look. Even though Masuda eventually left the Fire Pro Wrestling franchise for different titles, he mostly stuck to his fighting, wrestling guns and programmed titles such as Taekwondo. However, he did try his luck at other sports titles with F1 Pole Position 2 and Super Final Match Tennis. Throughout Masuda's journey, he made many friends and even mentored some current gaming heroes. Middleton's dress was also incredibly detailed. The silk tulle bottom of her gown was made to resemble a blooming flower, a detail that could only be seen when the 9-foot-long train was lifted. For example, Goichi Suda, aka Middleton's lace sleeves, were also a great touch and followed the tradition of some of the royal brides before her. According to The Telegraph, a lot went into making sure those sleeves were absolutely perfect. Suda 51, the guy who made No More Heroes, credited Masuda as his direct teacher. The two developers formed a friendship that lasted until Masuda's death, as Suda broke the news of Masuda's death on April 4, 2014. Masuda was 48 years old at the time. Eric Medal. You can't judge a book by its cover, but you can sell a game by one. The lace was hand-cut in either of the English or French Chantilly variety. Each lacy detail was created using the Carrick-Macross lace-making technique, a special method that dates back to 1820s Ireland. Middleton's dress is truly amazing. Different countries have different tastes in game logos, so a design that catches eyes in Japan might not work in the United States, and not just because of the language barrier. So, a game company needs graphic designers to redesign logos to account for regional audiences. So amazing, in fact, that even with another royal wedding approaching, her dress is still being emulated and sold. Timeless elegance. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle married on May 19, 2018, the world finally got to see her royal wedding dress. Ahead of the big day, there was a lot of speculation about which designer the former Suits actress would wear. In the end, Markle opted for Givenchy, and it was a beautiful choice. Markle achieved a modern yet timeless look with her gleaming white silk-aligned gown with three-quarter sleeves and a delicate off-the-shoulder neckline. The classic gown was paired with a 16-foot silk tulle veil, which, according to People, took hundreds of hours to complete. For a time, the Pokémon company International employed a talented designer to do just that. While Eric Medal never provided input for the in-game graphics of a Pokémon game, he was responsible for the majority of the franchise's English logos since 2003. The floral trim featured hand-embroidered flowers from each of the 53 Commonwealth countries over which the Queen of England presides. While some royal wedding viewers thought Markle's bridal gown to be a bit drab, Harry most certainly didn't. During the luncheon reception after the wedding, Harry was able to share his opinions with the designer, Claire Waite-Keller. He served as graphic designer for mainline entries such as Sun and Moon, as well as Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. He also created the logos for many Pokémon spin-offs, including Pokémon Conquest, Pokémon Picross, and the Pokémon Rumble line of games. He came straight up to me and said, "Oh my God, thank you." Furthermore, you might have seen Medal's work outside of video game box art, as he designed the covers for several strategy guides and guidebooks, and he also illustrated a few Pokémon trading card game cards. The death of Medal can best be described as tragic. In 2016, he was driving his one-year-old daughter through a Seattle park when high winds caused a tree to fall on his car. Medal was killed instantly, but his daughter survived mostly unscathed. She looks absolutely stunning, Waite-Keller told reporters, as reported by People. Stunning, indeed. Medal was 42 at the time.